Chosen one, you are not seeing this message on the final day of July by accident. Something has already changed inside you, even if your outer life has not yet caught up with it. The last few weeks may have tested your patience, your faith, your relationships, and your ability to keep moving without receiving immediate proof that anything was improving. There were moments when you questioned whether you were making progress at all. You looked at your circumstances and saw delays, unanswered questions, emotional distance, and plans that seemed to move more slowly than they should have. Yet here you are. You reached the last day of July without becoming the person the pressure was trying to turn you into. You did not lose your heart completely. You did not allow every disappointment to make you cruel. You may have reacted imperfectly at times, become tired, questioned your direction, or briefly returned to an old habit. None of that erased your growth. The real test was never whether you would behave perfectly. The test was whether you would eventually recognize what was happening and choose not to remain trapped there. That is what you did. The final test of July was not hidden inside one dramatic event. It appeared through small moments that seemed unrelated while you were experiencing them. A person disappointed you when you expected support. A plan became delayed at the exact moment you were ready to move. Someone from your past may have returned, or you may have felt an unusual desire to contact them. You were placed in situations where the old version of you would have chased, explained, accepted less, or abandoned an important goal in order to feel safe again. This time something was different. Even when you felt the familiar urge, you could see it more clearly. You noticed when your mind was trying to turn loneliness into a reason to return. You recognized when guilt was pushing you to say yes to something you did not truly want. You became aware of the way certain conversations changed your emotional state. Perhaps you still participated in one of those conversations, but afterward you understood the cost much faster than you would have before. That faster recognition is evidence of change. People often imagine spiritual growth as a state where the old temptation disappears completely. They believe that once they have healed, they will no longer miss the wrong person, feel afraid of uncertainty, or become emotionally affected by criticism. Real growth usually looks less dramatic. The feeling may still appear, but it no longer controls your behavior for the same amount of time. You recover more quickly. You ask better questions. You stop confusing intensity with truth. The test was not designed to prove that you no longer have emotions. It showed whether your emotions still had the authority to choose your future. During July, you may have been brought face to face with something you thought you had already resolved. An old memory returned. A familiar pattern appeared inside a new situation. Somebody behaved in a way that reminded you of a relationship you had promised yourself you would never repeat. At first, you may have wondered why life was bringing the same lesson back after all the work you had already done. It was not returning because you failed to learn. It was returning because the lesson needed to be tested in a real situation. Understanding something in private is different from applying it when another person is standing in front of you. It is easy to say that you have boundaries when nobody is asking you to break them. It is easy to say that you will stop chasing when the person has not returned. It is easy to trust your plan while nobody is questioning it. The final test appears when the familiar pressure returns and you must decide whether your new understanding will influence your response. You may not have responded exactly as you wanted. Perhaps you explained too much, answered a message you intended to ignore, or allowed somebody to occupy more of your time than they deserved. But eventually you stopped. You noticed the pattern. You no longer needed months or years to understand what was happening. That is why you passed. You passed because the old cycle could no longer hide from you. It may still have been able to affect you, but it could no longer convince you that it was normal. Think about the beginning of July. You may have entered the month carrying an expectation that something outside you needed to change first. You wanted another person to make a decision, an opportunity to become clear, a financial situation to improve, or a sign to confirm that you were moving in the right direction. As the month continued, the answer did not always arrive in the form you expected. Instead, you were shown where your attention was going. You saw how much energy was being spent trying to understand people who gave you inconsistent information. You noticed how often you delayed your own life while waiting for somebody else to become ready. You became aware of the habits you used to avoid difficult feelings. This may not have felt like a reward. At times, it may have felt like things were being removed. A conversation became colder. Someone stopped responding. A plan you were emotionally attached to lost momentum. You may have felt ignored, blocked, or forgotten. Yet some delays were creating enough distance for you to see what constant closeness had prevented you from recognizing. When you are standing inside a confusing situation, your first goal is usually relief. You want the person to answer, the opportunity to return, or the uncertainty to disappear. Distance allows you to ask a more important question. Even if this situation became available again, would it truly support the life you are trying to build? That question changes everything. You stop asking only whether you can get something back. You begin asking whether it deserves to return. You stop measuring a relationship by how deeply you feel and begin noticing how consistently it functions. You stop measuring an opportunity by how exciting it sounds and begin examining what it actually requires from you. This is the maturity July demanded. The month may have shown you that not every closed door was a punishment. Some doors were creating an unhealthy dependence because you had begun treating them as the only path available. You attached your future to one person, one opportunity, or one exact outcome. Every delay felt like proof that your destiny had been delayed. The final test was whether you could remain committed to what you truly wanted without insisting that it arrive through the form you had already chosen. You may want love, but love does not have to arrive through somebody who repeatedly makes you question where you stand. You may want financial progress, but it does not have to come through an arrangement that requires you to ignore obvious risks. You may want recognition, but one person's refusal to value you does not decide the value of your work. When the form and the deeper desire become separated, you regain freedom. You can continue wanting the outcome without chasing a version of it that damages you. That freedom may be one of the greatest things you gained in July. You may not feel completely detached yet. You can still miss someone and understand that returning is not wise. You can still feel disappointed about an opportunity and remain open to another path. Emotional release does not require you to pretend that nothing mattered. The test was whether you would let what mattered become an excuse to betray what you now know. For some of you, the final test involved silence. You spent much of July waiting for an answer. The silence may have felt personal. You wondered whether somebody had forgotten you, changed their mind, or decided that you were not worth the effort. You may have checked your phone more often than you want to admit. Each notification created a brief reaction before you saw that it was not the message you expected. Silence has a way of exposing where your peace has become dependent on another person's behavior. At first, you may have tried to break it. You considered sending another message, creating a reason to make contact, or asking someone else what was happening. Perhaps you did reach out once. The response may have provided temporary relief but failed to change the larger pattern. Eventually, you understood that another message could not give you what consistent behavior had failed to provide. You began allowing silence to become information. That was part of the test. You stopped treating the absence of an answer as a question you were required to solve. You started examining what the silence itself revealed about effort, priority, and emotional availability. There is strength in reaching that point, but it is not the loud kind of strength. Nobody applauds when you stop checking. Nobody sees the moment you decide not to send the message. There is no public evidence that an important battle has ended. The victory happens privately. You wake up and realize the person did not control your first thought. You complete part of your day before remembering the situation. You notice that the urge to check is weaker. This is how authority returns to you. It returns gradually through moments in which your attention belongs to your own life again. For others, the test involved being misunderstood. You may have tried to explain a decision to someone you trusted, expecting support. Instead, they responded with fear, criticism, or a reminder of your previous mistakes. You left the conversation feeling less certain than before. The old version of you might have abandoned the plan immediately. You may have assumed that another person's confidence made their opinion more accurate than your own experience. You would have changed your direction in order to avoid disappointing them. This time, even if their words affected you, they did not become the final answer. You began recognizing that advice is often shaped by the life the other person is willing to live. They evaluate your decision through their own relationship with risk, failure, money, love, and uncertainty. Their concern may be sincere, but sincerity does not automatically make their conclusion correct for you. The final test was whether you could hear another perspective without surrendering your entire future to it. You passed when you stopped treating disagreement as proof that you were wrong. You passed when you understood that being supported and being approved are not the same thing. A supportive person may question your plan, but they leave you with something useful to consider. A person who needs you to remain familiar leaves you afraid to move at all. July taught you to recognize the difference. The month may also have tested your relationship with urgency. Certain situations may have made you feel that you needed to decide immediately. Somebody wanted an answer, a commitment, money, forgiveness, or access to your time. The pressure increased because they presented delay as a threat. You were made to believe that waiting would cause you to lose the opportunity, the relationship, or the person's trust. The old version of you may have said yes simply to end the discomfort, but you began learning that genuine opportunities can survive reasonable examination. People who respect you can tolerate your need for time. When someone becomes angry because you want to think, their reaction tells you something about how much they benefit from your emotional pressure. You may not have said no perfectly, perhaps your voice shook, perhaps you gave a longer explanation than necessary. What matters is that you created a pause between the request and your response. That pause was progress. It interrupted the automatic behavior through which other people had been making decisions for you. For many chosen ones, July's final test was connected to being needed. You have probably been praised for your ability to handle difficult situations. People call you when they feel confused because you know how to listen. You see connections they miss. You can remain calm while someone else is overwhelmed. These qualities are valuable, but they may have created a role that became too large. People stopped asking whether you had the capacity to help. They assumed you would make room. You became the person who postponed rest, work, and personal decisions because another crisis arrived. When you attempted to create distance, guilt appeared. You worried that protecting your time made you selfish. You remembered all the times somebody supported you and believed you were obligated to remain permanently available. The final test was not whether you would stop caring. It was whether you could care without abandoning yourself. You began understanding that another person's emergency does not automatically become your responsibility. You can listen without solving everything. You can offer support tomorrow instead of allowing every crisis to control tonight. This may seem like a small change, but it affects every part of your future. Your plans cannot grow when every available hour is claimed by other people's needs. New opportunities require time, attention, and emotional capacity. July may have been showing you that you did not lack potential, you lacked protected space. Each time you tried to build something, another request entered. Each time you began focusing, somebody needed reassurance. Eventually, you became so accustomed to interruption that uninterrupted time felt uncomfortable. When the house became quiet, you reached for your phone. When nobody needed you, you wondered whether you mattered. This was another part of the test. Could you experience peace without creating a problem to solve? Could you spend an evening on your own without reopening an old connection simply to feel movement? Could you allow calm to remain calm? If your nervous system became familiar with uncertainty, peace may initially feel empty. You may interpret the absence of tension as the absence of meaning. Stable people can feel less exciting than inconsistent ones. A clear plan can feel less powerful than a dramatic promise. July invited you to question the idea that intensity is evidence of importance. Some of the most meaningful changes in your life will not make your heart race. They will allow your body to relax. You may enter a relationship where you do not need to interpret every message. You may receive an opportunity that does not require manipulation or urgency. You may build a routine that feels ordinary but slowly transforms your financial or physical life. The final test was whether you would overlook stability because chaos felt more familiar. Chosen one, you passed because you began noticing that peace has a different emotional texture. It does not always announce itself. It gives you enough space to think, work, rest, and become interested in your own life again. The buck moon may have played an important role in this final stage of July. Its symbolism is connected to growth that becomes visible after forming quietly. Much of your development this month happened before anyone else could see it. You may have looked at yourself and believed you were standing still. Yet beneath the surface, your response to life was changing. You were becoming less willing to negotiate with what repeatedly hurt you. Your standards were becoming more specific. You began understanding that boundaries are not punishments, they are instructions for how a relationship can continue without destroying your peace. The full moon brought this hidden growth into view. The days afterward showed whether you were prepared to protect it. The old pattern may have returned one final time. Someone reached out. An unresolved memory became strong. A fear you thought you had overcome appeared again. For a moment, you may have believed nothing had changed. But the return of a feeling is not the return of your old identity. You are not the same person simply because you became emotional. You are not back at the beginning because you missed someone. You are not failing because fear appeared before an important decision. The difference is what you do after the feeling arrives. In the past, you may have obeyed it immediately. Now you pause, you ask what triggered it. You consider whether the feeling is responding to new information or repeating a familiar warning from your past. That pause gives you choices. It is one of the clearest signs that the final test has been passed. You may also have noticed that certain relationships feel different as July ends. Nobody did anything dramatic, but the connection no longer fits as easily. You hesitate before sharing good news because you already know how the person will respond. You reduce parts of yourself to keep the conversation comfortable. You leave interactions feeling that you need to recover. This does not mean every difficult relationship must end on the final day of July. It means you should stop pretending that the effect is not real. Some relationships need new boundaries. Others may naturally become less central as your priorities change. A few may resist every attempt to develop a healthier structure. The test was whether you would continue sacrificing your growth in order to preserve the appearance of closeness. You can care about somebody and acknowledge that the current form of the relationship is not healthy. You can appreciate the history without giving the history permanent authority over your future. You can forgive and still require different behavior. These are not contradictions, they are signs that your understanding has become more complete. July may have also exposed your relationship with your own promises. You may have entered the month intending to begin something. You wanted to change a habit, develop a project, improve your finances, or take your physical health more seriously. The first days passed and the plan remained mostly inside your mind. Then guilt appeared. You may have begun speaking to yourself harshly, calling yourself lazy or undisciplined. That criticism created more resistance, so the plan became even harder to begin. The final test was whether you would continue using shame as a source of motivation. You may have learned that attacking yourself does not create consistent action. It produces a short burst followed by exhaustion. A better approach begins with honesty. What exactly made the action difficult? Was the goal too large? Were you waiting to feel completely ready? Did the plan require time that you had already given away? Were you trying to create something perfect before allowing it to exist imperfectly? Once the actual obstacle became clear, movement became more possible. You did not need to become a completely different person. You needed a smaller first step and a structure capable of surviving an ordinary day. The final test was passed when you stopped expecting motivation to do the work that structure must do. Perhaps you did not complete everything you planned in July. That does not mean the month was wasted. If you now understand why the plan kept stopping, August can begin differently. You are not starting from zero, you are starting with information. This last day of July is not asking you to review every mistake and punish yourself for it. It is asking you to notice what the month revealed about your patterns, what repeatedly captured your attention, where did your energy disappear? Which people brought out a version of you that you no longer want to maintain? What decision continued returning even when you tried to avoid it? These questions matter more than a dramatic prediction about what will happen next. Your destiny begins changing when your repeated responses change. The external world may require time to reflect that difference. A relationship may continue testing the old boundary. A financial goal may take months of consistent behavior. A project may develop slowly before anyone notices it. Do not use the lack of immediate results as a reason to return to the previous pattern. This may be the final challenge before August begins. The old behavior will offer quick relief. Checking the message reduces uncertainty for a few minutes. Saying yes prevents someone from becoming disappointed. Abandoning the plan protects you from judgment. Returning to the familiar relationship removes the discomfort of loneliness. Each decision solves the immediate emotion while recreating the long-term problem. Your new response may feel harder initially. You leave the message unanswered until you understand why you want to respond. You tell someone that you need time. You complete the imperfect first version of the work. You remain alone long enough to discover that the silence is survivable. These choices may not produce instant comfort, they create a different future. That is the exchange July taught you to understand. You are no longer choosing only according to what feels easiest in the next 10 minutes. You are considering what the choice will create over the next month, year, or chapter of your life. This is spiritual maturity in practical form. It is not about speaking perfectly, performing elaborate rituals, or pretending that you never struggle. It is the ability to recognize when a temporary feeling is attempting to make a permanent decision. You are seeing this on the last day of July because you have reached a point where that distinction matters. The next stage of your life cannot be built through the same automatic reactions. You cannot ask for peace while repeatedly reopening the conversations that destroy it. You cannot ask for growth while giving every important hour to somebody else's crisis. You cannot ask for healthier love while treating inconsistent attention as a sacred connection. You cannot ask for abundance while avoiding every practical decision that would create stability. This does not mean the universe is punishing you for being imperfect. It means the result you want requires space, structure, and participation. July showed you where those things were missing. Now you know what needs to change. Do not try to correct your entire life tonight. That approach creates pressure and usually leads to another cycle of disappointment. Choose one area where your new understanding can become visible. Perhaps there is a message you should not answer until tomorrow because your current emotion is too strong. Maybe you need to protect 1 hour and complete something you have postponed. You may need to write down a boundary in clear language before the person tests it again. Perhaps the action is allowing the final day of July to end without contacting someone who has already shown you their level of effort. The action should be simple enough to complete and meaningful enough to create evidence. Evidence matters because the mind trusts what it repeatedly sees. Every time you maintain a boundary, you teach yourself that your needs can survive another person's disappointment. Every time you work on the plan instead of discussing it, you prove that your attention can produce something real. Every time you tolerate silence without chasing an answer, you reduce the power of uncertainty. This is how the new identity becomes stable, not through one emotional declaration, through ordinary behavior repeated when nobody is watching. Chosen one, the fact that you passed the final test does not mean August will contain no challenges. It means you are entering those challenges with more awareness than you had before. You will recognize manipulation more quickly. You will understand the difference between advice and fear. You will notice when guilt is attempting to choose for you. You will stop calling every return destiny and begin asking what has actually changed. This awareness will protect you more effectively than trying to control every event. You cannot control who contacts you, which opportunity becomes delayed, or how another person reacts to your boundary. You can control whether their reaction becomes the authority that decides your next step. That is the power returning to you. Some people may become distant as you use it. Do not assume every distance is a loss. A relationship that depends on your self-abandonment cannot remain unchanged when you stop abandoning yourself. The person may adjust and learn a healthier way of relating to you. If they refuse, the distance reveals the conditions on which the closeness was built. Let that information be useful. You do not need to chase everyone who becomes uncomfortable with your growth. You need to observe whether they are capable of meeting you without demanding the return of the old version. There may also be people who surprise you. Someone you expected to resist may respect the boundary. A friend may support your plan without needing to control it. A relationship may become stronger because you finally communicate honestly. Growth does not remove every person. It shows which relationships can adapt. As July ends, pay attention to those who allow you to become more fully yourself. They may not agree with every decision, but they do not require you to become confused in order to remain close. This is the kind of connection that can enter the next chapter with you. The final test also showed whether you could trust a change before the world confirmed it. You may not yet have the result. The new opportunity may not be visible. The relationship may still be unresolved. Your finances may look similar to the beginning of the month. But you feel the difference in what you are willing to accept. That internal shift is not the entire journey, but it changes the direction of every step that follows. Destiny does not always move through one dramatic event. Sometimes it moves when a person stops participating in the behavior that kept producing the same result. The first visible evidence may be silence, distance, or an empty space where the old pattern used to be. Do not rush to fill it. The space may be uncomfortable because you do not yet know what will replace what you released. Let it remain open long enough for another possibility to become visible. You do not need to know the entire future tonight. You need to know what you are no longer willing to repeat. That is enough to enter August differently. If you understand this message, write *I passed the final test in the comments. Do not write it because you believe every difficulty is over. Write it because you recognize that the old pattern no longer has the same ability to disguise itself. You can see it now. You know how it begins. You know which emotions it uses. You understand what it costs when you continue feeding it. That awareness is what allows the cycle to end. Before July closes, take a moment to acknowledge the version of you who survived this month, not the imaginary perfect version who always knew what to do. Acknowledge the real person who became tired, confused, emotional, and still kept searching for a more honest response. You may have made mistakes. You may have reopened one door that should have remained closed. You may have delayed a decision longer than necessary. Still, you return to yourself. That is what matters. The final test was not asking whether you would never fall into the old reaction. It was asking whether you would eventually stop building a home there. You'd now enter August without demanding that it immediately reward you for everything you endured. Begin with the quieter responsibility of protecting what July taught you. Give important plans enough privacy to develop. Give boundaries enough consistency to become believable. Give your body enough rest to make clear decisions. Give healthy opportunities enough attention to reveal their value. Stop giving the past automatic access simply because it knows how to contact you. The next chapter may begin more quietly than you expect. It may start with a peaceful morning, a completed task, a conversation that feels easier, or the realization that something which once controlled you no longer has the same effect. Notice those changes. They are not too small. They are the first signs that your life is reorganizing around a different version of you. You are seeing this on the last day of July because the month has already completed its work. It showed you what you were carrying, where your energy was being used, and which parts of your life required a more honest decision. The final test was whether you would continue looking outside yourself for permission to believe what your own experience had made clear. You no longer need that permission. You can listen to advice without surrendering your judgment. You can feel love without accepting instability. You can experience fear without allowing it to cancel the plan. You can disappoint someone without becoming a bad person. You can leave a question unanswered without allowing it to consume the day. These abilities are the evidence that you are ready for what comes next. Let July end. Do not reopen it through one final message, one unnecessary argument, or one attempt to recover something only because its absence feels unfamiliar. You have already received the lesson. You do not need another repetition to prove that it was real. Allow the last hours of the month to be calm. You do not need to perform your transformation. You do not need to announce that you have entered a new timeline. Let August discover the change through the way you live. The people around you will notice that your yes means more because it is no longer automatic. They will notice that your no does not require an hour of explanation. They will see that you are working on something instead of constantly discussing what you hope to do. Most importantly, you will notice. You will feel what it is like to keep a promise to yourself after the emotional moment passes. That feeling creates trust. Once you begin trusting your own decisions, the future stops appearing like something that can be taken from you by one person's response. Chosen one, you passed the final test because the pressure did not remove your ability to choose. It made that ability visible. You are not leaving July with every answer. You are leaving with something more useful, the ability to recognize which questions no longer deserve your life. Take that understanding with you. Protect it through action. And when August begins, do not ask whether you are ready. Look at everything you now refuse to repeat. That is your answer.